Welcome back to Beatnik Garage. Hopefully it's welcome back. If not, check out the other videos. I'm on episode 9 at this point. I am putting this whole car together from scratch. Just started with the body. That is all I bought. As far as like the massive components, I'm building the chassis completely, and basically every other bit and piece I'm putting together from either stuff I've collected or, you know, purchased parts, Speedway, so on and so forth. So anyway, what is going on right now? This is episode 9, and I have to do steering and suspension stuff in the front end of this. I probably won't quite get to the steering, but the suspension I am speaking of is the bones, the radius rods that keep the front axle centered underneath the chassis. So I am running 1946 bones. They have a sweep in them that are pretty cool looking, and they dip down after the steering arms, the cross steer. And so what I have to accomplish in this episode is the placement of where those bones will be and terminate on the frame. I have to sort out a way that I'm going to actually secure those to the frame, and I'll go into that a little bit more. And then of course I need to shorten the arms as well as weld the tie rod ends into the arms. So if I get that accomplished, we're doing pretty solid. Anyway, if you would, like, subscribe, follow along, and let's get into it. All right, so I'm drawing on my table because I don't have a dry erase marker at the moment to draw on the whiteboard. Anyway, what I'm trying to do is sort out how I'm going to mount my front radius rods, or the bones, to my chassis. So on my chassis, they're going to actually hit, if everything's calculated and sorted out at the moment correctly, these are going to land dead in the side of the frame rail. Like, it's a 2x4 tube. It's going to land dead in the middle of that 4 inches along the side. So what I don't want to do is weld this directly to my frame rail, because now I have to drill a hole through the inside of the frame rail, drill a hole through the outside of the frame rail, weld this directly to the outside of the frame rail, and now I'm gonna have to have a big hole on the inside of my frame rail so that I can get to and access this castle nut and the pin to slide through there. I don't want to have to do all that. I don't want a giant hole in my frame. So what I'm actually looking at doing is welding this to a bracket that sticks off of the side of the frame, which I could do a little bit of work, calculate what these distances are, and kind of correct for a few things so that they line up more square with the front axle. But more importantly, what I'm trying to accomplish is, if I weld this to the outside of a bridge, basically, think of this from the upside down, from the bottom side of the frame, I can blow a hole through this plate, cap it off on the top so that it's nice and structurally sound, isn't going to go anywhere. And as long as I have enough room between the end of this and the side of my frame rail, I can get this nut in and out. That means from the bottom of the car, I can also then pin through the castle nut. So I'm looking at doing that right now, something similar to that. I think if I were going to sketch this up from a side view, the frame rail would look like this. This would come out and off with a hole in the side. It would look like so, sticking off the side. And again, this tie rod end would go right through there. I could make this out of, you know, pretty stout steel, 3/16 plate or whatever. I have all the material to do that. This is probably the way I'm going, because what this also accomplishes is my cowl on the body is going to have these radius rods end right before the A-pillar and go through the cowl panel, through the body panel of the cowl. And what I don't want to do is have to cut a big chunk of the cowl out for these things to sit weighing against the frame. So this could possibly take up the space and get these tie rods out further and closer to the skin of the cowl, And so these would basically just, you'd only see this much of it at the cowl where it enters the body. But in all actuality, it'll be nice and structurally sound. So chances are pretty good. This is the way I'm going. This is basically my next step. So calculating all this stuff, I'll have to sort out, take a couple measurements on the body and make sure that with what I have to do here in order to accomplish this and a room for this nut to come off, if I did this, I want to make sure that all of this isn't sticking out so far out of the body that it looks stupid either. This is kind of drawn to scale, and you see even that distance is really close. Like that's not going to work. So this thing will have to come out, you know, and give myself about 1/8 of an inch or so in here. Maybe a little less would be fine. But I want to make sure that all of this jives really well, and see what it looks like as this terminates at the skin of the cowl. So I need to know how far from the outside of my frame rail to the inside of the skin of my body panel on the cowl is, and I can see if all this is going to jive and work. So we'll see. This is very likely the way I'm going. All right, so to go over a couple things a little bit better here. So the way that I've drawn this, basically, if you can imagine the rest of the frame horns that are straightened out and actually parallel, this is the taper that follows the body. So my correction in distance here is to accommodate for both the taper of the frame as well as the width of the wishbones out at the axle, coming in at also an angle. The wishbone distance is like 33.5 from center to center. The frame rails are 25-inch outside. And of course, so that, you know, brings the bones in at an angle to the opposite angled chassis taper. So the reason all that matters is these things, these are Speedway parts, they of course have a range of motion that's limited. So right now this looks like it's about 90 degrees here, it's perpendicular, but if you stretch this, if you flex it to where it's maxed out, that's about where it's maxed out. So what I don't want to do is max this out constantly. Let me go over to the frame and show you what I'm talking about. As you can see, this portion of the frame rail is straight, and back there, it tapers out. This pivot point for my bone is also going to go inboard, and so it's going to be pointed in just about the same angle that the rear portion of the frame is tapered out. It's pretty close. So there will essentially be a V from there to here. What I don't want to do is max these joints out in order to reach the pivot point up front. I don't want to max this out and make this tie rod end live its entire life maxed out at this angle. Ideally, this thing, you would make it live about 90 degrees so that it's got plenty of range of motion. Why all that matters, one biggest thing is wear. If you make this tie rod end live maxed out in its range of motion constantly, inevitably it's going to wear this joint out a lot faster. So it's, you know, it's just ideal if you put this thing in the center of its range of motion, and that's where it lives on a normal basis. Beyond that, this range of motion that this has is what is going to allow your front axle to pivot on one side compared to the other. Okay, so to better explain what's going on with the front end and why you don't want this to live at the max edge of its range of motion, is you need to be able to allow your front end to flex on one side or the other independent from the other side. The range of motion of this is what allows that. clear back at the pivot points. So it's really important you don't max this thing out one way or the other, and you try to let it live right where it wants to live, 90 degrees or perpendicular to the threaded portion here, so that this has the max range of motion it's allowed to have. That will make all of your suspension components not bind up when you go out of the driveway, or, you know, whatever gets your chassis a little, or flexes your suspension a little bit. So that is the importance of doing this. So something I want to get your guys' input on, and really this comes down to aesthetics. I know that the mechanics of it will be fine either way, but just the aesthetics of it. So what, I have 46 bones, front bones on this. These are 46s, and they have this nub sticking out of them that was for more suspension stuff. But as you see, they've been cut off. That was before I got a hold of them. What I'm considering though is, since there's so much material there, is, and also I do know that this is on the wrong side. I'm gonna flip them when I do the all the welding on the ends. But what are your thoughts of me drilling and tapping this and making a front mounted shock mount, like off of this? Because I can drill and tap this, put a stud into it, and mount my shock off of it, and then I just have to mount my shock mount on the top of the frame here. I just don't know. The question is really, if I've got a grill that's sitting right here and I've got headlights in this area, are the shocks gonna look like they've filled up this whole front end too much with the grill there and headlights here? Is it gonna look too much with a small tube shock here? Is it all just gonna be stacked up too much and too busy in the front end of this thing? Let me know, drop a comment. I'd like to see what your guys' thoughts are. I don't know, I really don't know. I'm usually really good at picturing these kinds of things, but I'm not sure if this is gonna be something I wanna do or not. So let me know what your thoughts are. Drop a comment down there, and I don't know, maybe you guys got some better ideas than I do. I could also, of course, put them behind the axle, drill and put a tube through the bones, and, you know, there's plenty of ideas. It's just a matter of those things. I don't want to cut them off if they're useful, those nubs on the front of the 46 bones. So I don't know, maybe they're useful and I can use them for the shock mounts. So we'll see. Let me know. Thanks. All right, well, I goofed up on 2 accounts, and I'll show you where both of those are. Fortunately, it is salvageable. Well, I guess not entirely. Anyway, here's a finished product of what I'm trying to build with a hole right here for this bung to fit in. I'm going to do that as an 1 3/8 hole that needs to be in there. I'm going to recut these parts anyway because you see this mark on here. Where I messed up was I calculated everything completely on a single line instead of an offset, meaning had all of this gone off my center line, everything would have been a-okay. However, I didn't compensate for the distance here from the center of this bung when it's welded into that plate, and from the center of that bung out to here, or rather from this face of this out to the center line of this. I didn't accommodate for any of that. I know better. I just wasn't thinking about it. So what that did was pushed with this, and that top distance. You see it has now pushed it way out. So my center line is no longer here. It's quite a ways out further. What does that do? Well, let me show you on the car. So here it is, mocked up roughly where it's going to be on the car. I've just clamped it. It's probably not straight. And you can see that bar is quite a ways off from where it needs to be. And you see the angle difference here going this way on the plate, and this rod, it's pretty heavy. And that's exactly why I was trying to do all this, was to make sure that that didn't happen at all. Now, by the time I put the weld-in bung here and the tie rod center line comes almost out to where this thing is sitting at the moment, and you see that the angles just don't jive. So I've now transposed this after I got it directly where it was supposed to be. I checked all the offset. And now I've transposed that line onto here. I'm really only using that line for reference. I'm going to go back into my CAD model and adjust everything by a few degrees and recut the parts, as well as, like I said, I messed up a few places. Not only did I mess up on the angle, but I also didn't put this hole in here for the bung to weld into. So back to the drawing board. Normal stuff. Sometimes it happens. So now that I've got the new pieces cut and everything is accounted for, all the spacing and distance, you can see now this is dialed in just about perfect. I've got to do a little bit more fitment to make sure this is pointed where it needs to, but as you see, by the time you get the tie rod end on this bar and it's spaced out a ways, this is pretty much the angle we're going to be at. So got everything dialed in, got the hole set up for the weld-in bung. So let's go ahead and tack all this stuff together. Okay, well, so there it is. There's one. I'm gonna go ahead and check this against the car again real quickly. And if all is well, which I'm pretty sure it is, I will knock out the other one. All right, so here's what we got. This is the setup I'm looking at doing. You can see basically a 1/4 inch on inside and outside. And then that will then sit against the frame. And you see, all that being the case, I'm pretty much lined up exactly where I need to be. So this is turning out just about perfect. Love it. All right. Get this up the same way we did the last one. It just seemed to work out well. Anyway, so now we have a right and a left. And the idea behind all this, of course, is that these will be like this. Well, technically they'll be like this. This will be the front. This will be going towards the front. So, let's go take a look. We'll clamp this to the frame and see what it looks like. I don't know that I'm quite ready to commit to exactly where they're going to go on the frame yet. But I know we are getting super close. So what I'll do when I get to that point is, of course, pull these bungs off, set them in here, give myself some sort of a spacer that makes sure that their depth is exactly correct. Probably just clamp something to all of that, just this bung, and make sure it's spaced correctly out of there before I tack it in place and run a bead around it. But this should be more than sufficient, and far better than just using the wall of the tubing, which was, honestly, that was one of my concerns. I wasn't a fan of what it was looking like I was going to have to do. So I guess it's worth explaining why I had to do something like this compared to what some people do with other bracketry. So you buy bracketry off of Speedway or whatever, and those brackets usually, because people don't put their frames quite as low as I have, most likely, those brackets hang off the bottom of the frame, and then you can put this through that bracket, weld this to the bracket, and all is well, because you can get to this nut because it's hanging below your frame rail. In my case, it's up in the middle of the frame rail, and so that is why I had to give myself this pocket to spin a nut on and get the pin in. So this will basically, what you'll be seeing from the bottom of the car is being able to get to this pin, being able to get to this nut. So this should all work out pretty well. Let's go over to the car and see what we got. All right, so here's what we've got. Take that out for the moment. Just to give you an idea of what's going on here. So my exhaust is likely, as of right now, gonna come out of here and go right through the frame rail here. Take a 90, if I can fit all this. I don't even know if I can fit all this. And head back into the car. I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to get away with that. It is very congested in here. There's a lot going on. Anyway, because of that, I wanna make sure, oh, and sorry, worth explaining. I have marked on here where the A-pillar sweep is. So on the 2829, I guess, and earlier, the A-pillar sweeps down and it sweeps forward. It comes down and sweeps forward. What I'm trying to do is make sure I stay out of that. I don't want to have to cut that up. So I want to stay forward of where that A-pillar sweep comes down, and that's about right here. that means I want to keep I've only got a small window between putting this here and this is where the A-pillar stops. I've only got this window to get my exhaust through here. So we'll see. I'm not 100% convinced that's going to be possible, but as you see, I'm willing to do all kinds of custom stuff here, so let's see what happens. So it's not going to stay. All right. If I'm going to eyeball this, this is basically going to go about there. Now, by the time we put this in, and it's roughly a 1/4 inch, we have managed to do exactly what I wanted to do, which is keep this perpendicular to this. So it's 90 degrees. That gives me the full range of motion for this tie rod end. Okay, so what this is going to accomplish for me, again, this is what it will look like from the side. What this is going to tell me now is, since I know for sure, I've already measured this multiple times, I have my wheelbase correct, meaning I have the distance from this center line to that center line on the axle is correct on both sides. I've checked it in an X. Everything is within a 1/16 of an inch, which is really happy. I was surprised by that. I got it that close. Yeah, what I mean by that is it's based on these pedestals being in the right spot. So it was just knocking it around a little bit till I got it right. So what this tells me now is, as you see, that's like dead lined up. I can place these, get these centered up along the frame, forward to rear, up and down, and now I'll adjust these so that I have adjustment both directions. It's about correct right there. Now I know exactly where I need to cut my arm. I will make a mark on this. I'll double check center line from here to back to the center line of the pivot point on the axle, ensure that they're both the same from side to side, and then I can go ahead and cut these. I'm gonna have to reshape it. As you see, the thickness of this compared to here is quite a bit different. So I'm gonna do a few different things and taper it up so that it looks nicely and comes into this. So I'm realizing I don't have my fish plates on here yet. A fish plate, if you're not familiar with it, is a plate that will span both of these pieces of steel in order to spread the load and not cause stress just up this weld. You can see that was a downhill weld. I don't have the bottom welded yet. I think you can see that. Anyway, I haven't had this thing off the frame table very long to have done that. So what this tells me is a couple things. One, I need to grind this down a little ways so that it's flush. I need to put my fish plate on here, and then this thing needs to take into account the height of that fish plate, which is not a big deal. I'll just basically cut a relief in this edge and in the top if it needs to be a little bit. So I've cut some oval fish plates for this, just to add a little bit of style to it. I think I also had some diamond ones, but I don't remember what those were for, or if they were for this project or not. But anyway. Throw some nuts back on that just to bind everything in place correctly. So something else that is on my mind about this, and I'd love to have you guys' input. I mean, honestly, it'll shake out in the math eventually anyway, but that's not good. What is going on here? Oh, there's some chewy stuff in there. I think I might have another one of these nuts. So, see, this is the reason I'm not a big fan of what's going on with jamming these. You see, I know there's a better way to do this, and I don't know if you can see it on camera, but all the threads are jacked up inside this thing already, and I can't help but think that it's just because it's not happy and it's binding up in here. I've got another one, I think, here. Yep, there we go. That one's nice and clean. Alright, so for the moment, we'll roll with that one that's on there. What are you guys' thoughts? I have these 46 bones, and you see how they're kind of working out, that they're nearly parallel to my front frame horns, or the frame portion that's beside the engine, which they're parallel. These bones are nearly parallel to those, and I have been told in the past that it was pretty common for people using these 36 or these 46 bones that they would have to heat the bones and kink them in order to get some of the steering radius so that the tire itself doesn't hit the arm back here when you turn. I don't know. Do you guys think I'm going to run into that? If you would, drop a comment down there. Let me know. And if so, beyond that, if you've done it, is there some old-time secret that you might know about of where exactly you should bend that? Now, I mean, of course, common sense kind of tells you bend it right where the tire is going to make contact. But I don't know. Is there some benefit? Is there something inside these bones that I don't know about? You know, if you got anything for me, let me know. Do me a favor, and I haven't normally stated this in the past, but if you would, like and subscribe to these, because I'm realizing I am gaining a little bit of momentum with followers. It seems people like the content, at least like the build. I'm working on my editing. I do it all myself, just poking around. This entire process is just a hobby, and the only reason I've gotten this far is just because people seem to enjoy it. So if you would, like this video, subscribe, watch the other ones, like those videos too. I've got a couple of them that really gained some momentum, it seemed. There we go. I was going to say, I can see the top of the head's not moving. When is it going to tighten up? Okay. So now we will let the frame the rest of the way down. The springs aren't going to do anything surprising. The shackles are already to the inside, meaning sometimes these will jump if you let them, so on and so forth. So what I'm going to do right now is go ahead and clean up the frame, the weld, put a fish plate on, weld all the way around that, relief cut my bracket and get it landed in the spot it's supposed to be. Oh, actually, I cannot do that. I need to get those bungs welded into these before I do any of that, because I will not be able to get to the back side to weld those bungs, and I want to. I want to weld the front and the back with those bungs in there. So I guess maybe that's where I'm at next, is get those welded in place. Let's do that. One. Alright, so what is important here? I need to make sure that when I put these in, that I orient them correctly, because these have I think it's a 7-degree taper inside to accept this joint. So I need to make sure that I weld these with that taper to the outside and not the other way around. That would be really bad. So I was going to leave these welds untouched, but I think because I want to make sure that I split this difference like absolutely accurately. I don't know, I might be able to do this without messing with those welds. I just want to put a spacer. I'm going to put this down on the table, put a spacer underneath each side, and hold it a 1/4 inch off the table, and then go ahead and tack a few spots on this thing. And then we'll go ahead and get this thing set in place. I think I can probably manage without it. I think I have some little chunks. I have a 1/4 inch piece with a U shape in it. Just slide that bad boy up on there. Just like so. Oh yeah, that's perfect. Yes, that is great. So what we'll do is slide this over the edge of the table. And we will pin all this down. One. Alright, so what's important to know about this transition to this frame member, is there's a transition there that is at this angle. I made these as just basically a guide plate, and fortunately it's dialed in exactly like it's supposed to be because I use these plates. But what that means is my fish plate also needs to have this angle bent in it. I'm going to give it a shot. Okay, so here is everything mocked up. I am pretty happy with it. Of course, I've got to take this back off, weld up my fish plate, and then go ahead and put this back in place. What I've done is scribed a line across the top, which is the depth from the top down to here, to get this dead center of the frame rail. I'm going to double check that. Really, how I'm going to do that, I'm going to put an angle finder on my axle up here and make sure everything's good to go there, that I'm around about 10, which you can see as of right now. You can see the angle that's built into the cross member. Really, I can check to see if the axle is parallel with the cross member. I'm perfectly fine. And that is all landing everything correctly back here at that point. So that height up and down the rail may change depending on what is happening with the front axle. So I'll at this point I need to pull everything back off there other than the fish plates. Go ahead and weld in the fish plates real quick and move forward with getting all the geometry correct for the front end, landing those, and then we go from there. Okay, so what I'm trying to show right now, I've got one straight edge clamped to the axle, the face of the axle, and I've got one straight edge clamped to the face of my cross member. What it's actually told me is I need to move my axle angle a little bit. You see how I can move and line that up. What that tells me is actually perfection. Exactly where I have the tie rod ends in the center of the frame rails on the side, back there, is the correct position. So I pushed the radius rod down till this was plumb. Both of these were in line, rather. and it actually dialed in exactly the right height for that. So that just verified that I can go ahead and place these in this height that I have them set right now. So that's great. All right, so here's what we got. I have put my fish plate in, nice clean welds, both sides all the way around. Now this is mocked up. I've double checked the center of this back to a static point back there. It's good. I've checked on the other side. Even though the other side's not ready to weld, I've verified that everything's going to be okay. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and burn this, tack this in a couple of spots, and probably not fully weld this right now. I'll make sure that everything's dialed in and that everything's going to go okay with all my geometry here, and then we'll go from there. So everything's going well right now. Okay, so here's where we're at. I have double checked and verified all my dimensions everywhere. This is 100% spot on. The axle is square, true to everything, exactly where I need to be. The angle of the axle in relation to this is, everything is just great. Everything, I actually pleasantly surprised that everything is so precise. Everything is great. So at this point, what I'm going to do, rather than mark these bones at this and then pull them off and cut them and whatnot, I'm going to go ahead and cut them in place, lined up with what the where they need to be cut on the tie rods, and then I'll probably go ahead and pull the tie rods back out of here, slide them in the ends of the tubes, probably do a little cutting and whatnot to get the diameter and the oval shape to fit this weld-in bung a little bit better, and then I will go ahead and tack all of it in place while it's all in the car, and then I'll pull these back off, take them to the table, and fully weld them out. So yeah, this is very good. Everything's going like it should. Okay, so let me get you in here and show you what I've got. So I knew this was coming, but I've got to taper this up nicely and or split the difference, which changes my angle, which is not bad. I can afford to do that. But anyway, I've got to mess around with that a little bit. Not a big deal. This went flawlessly. Let's get on to the other side. Okay. Well, there she is. Here's the passenger side. Everything's all tacked in. Everything except for the rod, of course. And I'm super close on that. What I am doing and determining, I'll show you really quickly. The next step is to verify that I get those to line up. How do I do that? I can push this down. You see now that's in line. What I am doing right now is pushing down right here on the rod to get it where I need it. It's all bound up right there in this image, but I can straighten all that up. What it tells me is I need to draw this down in line with that, like that. And what I'll probably do is get all this dialed in and lined up nice and clean like this, tack it in place, pull the whole bones off the car, and then go over and finish all of the trimming and whatnot to get this to taper up nicely into this bung. So this has been extremely good. I'm very happy with all the results. Now I have very close to having the suspension tied in like it's supposed to be, my axle centered, and all of the serious components of the front suspension will be done. I'll know that I have everything in place correctly. Very happy with it. Okay, so what we've got right now, I have pulled with the ratchet strap, pulled the bottom of the axle under, which has then lined up both my cross member and my axle, which is great because now they're in the same path of travel, as well as my axle is definitely at 10 degrees. What that did is actually very beneficial when it comes to this. So it opened up the gap here because it drew it down and back that way. But what it's done is I've beveled this, and I was concerned that I didn't want to have to bevel this whole piece, but now this gap opened up. That's perfect. I can get penetration all the way to the bottom of this thing. That bung goes all the way back into about here. So there's more than enough material there. So I'm likely to weld all the way around the top of this and then take these bones off the vehicle and take them over to the car, over to the table, and worry about getting, I'll probably cut a pie cut all the way back like 6 inches or so, and then take a wedge out of the center and pinch it shut and close it in. So we'll take some video on that, but either way, this has worked out very beneficial. It's the same on both sides. There's a gap on both sides now. And yeah, this is working out really well. All right, well, here's where we're at. Everything is tacked in place. I've welded in at least the top portion of the bungs. That is not a hole. You can see I'm gonna have to pull these off of the car, move them to the bench and clean that up like I've mentioned already. I will fully weld this stuff, but what I'm gonna do right now is go ahead and wrap up this episode so I can get something out there. You see what's gonna happen next, but yeah, I'm really happy with this. This is, got my fish plates tied in. This will be on top of that, make that even stronger. This went really well. All my geometry is nailed. Like, it just went so good. Went so good. So really happy with this. The front end is now stationary. No weird stuff going on. I can move it really well now if I take it back off here. And this just puts me one step closer to getting the body on it, because I've got to do a lot of verification with the body. But yeah, there we go. That's where we got today. All right, well, we got quite a bit done. In conclusion, really, I guess I managed to get the front axle stationary under the frame. I've got the 3 pivot points, or the 3 mounting points for that at this point, which are both of the bones at the frame rails and the spring mount. What I've got left to do is, of course, all the steering geometry. That's all got to be set up right. And shocks, of course. So what's coming next, though? What is next, I think, at this point is probably going to be steering. I do know, and I have written on my board, that my whiteboard, because I always try to keep my plans up there, I need to get that car off of the pedestals, unfortunately. I took a few measurements, realized I cannot count on where the frame is, like, basically proportionate to the ground. Like, it's not level. And I need to be able to make sure that I get the frame down at ride height when it's sitting on tires and wheels. It's just an added complication right now for it to be up on these pedestals to try to calculate all of that stuff, because they're not, it's not even. Tire diameters are different size, so of course, even if where the tire is settled into those pedestals is, you know, basically the front wheels are smaller, front tires are smaller, so they sit a little bit lower inside there. It's just a lot of stuff I don't want to have to contend with when I can just set it down on the floor. So anyway, that's what we've gotten done. That's where we're headed next. And hope you guys are enjoying. I do have a small vacation coming up here in about a week and a half. And so, oh, actually, I guess it's only like a week away. gonna be several weeks before I get back to this, unfortunately. But it's going well. Keep after it, and I will as well. Thanks. Appreciate it.